Welcome back to the Gridiron Expert. We're continuing our SEC football predictions today, and our next team had a breakout season last year, going 13-2 and making the college football playoff, and they are looking to make their second straight appearance. They are the Georgia Bulldogs. The Bulldogs returned 13 starters this year, 8 on offense and 5 on defense. On offense, they are led by quarterback Jake Fromm, running back DeAndre Swift, top wide receivers in McCole Hardman and Terry Godwin, and they returned 4 of their 5 offensive linemen from last season. On defense, they have 5 returning starters, will be led by Jonathan Ledbetter on defensive end, and will be missing some of that talent they lost to the NFL last year, including big-time playmaker Roquan Smith, who was a first-round NFL draft pick. But overall, should be a very, very solid team from a team that went all the way to the national championship last year and nearly beat Alabama in what was a devastating loss for the Bulldogs, 26-20 in overtime. This is definitely a team that has the talent to return to the college football playoff. I never want to doubt Kirby Smart, and I know a lot of people are questioning their defense, but obviously with him as their head coach, a defensive-minded coach, I know they're going to be just fine, especially with those 5 returning starters. But I do think the offense is going to be the strength for them. Some people fear Jake Fromm could go into a sophomore slump, and if that's the case, they have a great backup quarterback in Justin Fields, who looked great in the Georgia spring game. Some people think DeAndre Swift is overrated, but he had over 600 yards on the season last year and learned behind some great Georgia running backs in Stoney Michel and Nick Chubb. So the Bulldogs will be just fine. They opened the season against Austin Peay, an easy win for the Bulldogs, no worries there. And then only in the second week of the season, open up SEC play on the road against South Carolina. And this is a game that a lot of people have been hyping up during the offseason, a lot of people have been looking forward to, and one that can have major implications on the SEC East standings. And this is a game that I'm really intrigued to see because this Williams-Brice Stadium at South Carolina is going to be rocking. It's going to be a great environment. It's going to be a lot of fun. And it's going to be a very hostile environment for a Georgia team that, like I said, has very high expectations, but I'm a little concerned about their defense, especially going up against what will be Will Muschamp's best team at South Carolina, including a very, very solid offense, returning a lot of their offensive line, quarterback Jake Bentley. You got Rico Dowdle at running back and Deebo Samuel, who returns from injury to guide South Carolina. Hopefully he can stay healthy after their season opener for this game against Georgia. So this is going to be very, very big in terms of the standings. And I'm going to end up giving a Georgia loss here at South Carolina. A lot of that's going to have to do with home field advantage for the Gamecocks. A lot of it's going to do for maybe a young defense. Obviously aren't going to be extremely tested against Austin Peay. And then they're going up against a tough environment at South Carolina, against a very tough offense as well. South Carolina could make some noise in the East, and you know Will Muschamp is going to have his team fired up for this game. And I know a lot of people are going to criticize me for this loss, but I will say that I think Georgia will lose at least once this year. The schedule is not extremely difficult, but I think they will lose at least once, and it is definitely better to get that loss out of the way early than it would be late to maybe say lose to Auburn late in the season. But I do expect them to lose at least once. And I think it's going to come to South Carolina, a team that could surprise a couple of people this year. And then Middle Tennessee coming back to Athens won't be a problem for the Bulldogs. Another win there. At Missouri, and if you remember the last time the Bulldogs and the Tigers met at Missouri, it was a 28-27 Georgia victory, and they just squeaked it out in the end. Took easy care of the Tigers last year, but they're going up against another great quarterback in Drew Lock, one that's also projected to be very high in the NFL draft next year, Demario Crockett at running back. So I can see a lot of points being scored in this game. I don't always have a lot of faith in the Missouri defense, led by Barry Odom, who was promoted from defensive coordinator to head coach. I think Georgia's going to be able to go on the road and take an easy win here. It could be fairly close up until about halftime if the Bulldogs pull away late. I think by this point in the season, their defense is going to be a little more settled down. Kirby Smart is going to kind of figure things out, get this defense ready, and they're probably going to be able to shut down Drew Lock. And then Tennessee, back in Athens, if you remember last year, Georgia went on the road and beat Tennessee 41-0. They shut them out at Neyland Stadium. And now Tennessee, with a new head coach, and a lot of questions on both sides of the ball, has to come into Athens. And I don't expect them to put much of a fight here in Athens. Now, I do expect them to score at least a field goal, at least a couple points, but I don't see them upsetting the Bulldogs. It's another win for Georgia. Same thing with Vanderbilt. I know I predicted Georgia to lose at Vanderbilt last year. Had a little more faith in that Commodores team. This year, Derek Mason's on the hot seat. They have a good quarterback in Kyle Shermer, but I don't see them coming back on the road like they did 2 years ago when they beat Georgia. I believe that game was 17-16. That's not going to happen this year. Georgia gets another win against the Commodores. And then at LSU. Now, this is a big-time game here. We all know playing in Death Valley is very tough. This is probably going to be that 2:30 CBS game everyone's wanting to watch. But if you've seen some of my other videos, I said this is the weakest LSU team we have seen in recent memory. Sure, they have Joe Burrow at quarterback, and the defense will by far be their strength thanks to defensive coordinator Dave Aranda. But Ed Orgeron's on the hot seat. The offense is going to struggle. I think Georgia's offense will not struggle. Even though LSU's defense is going to be very solid, I think Georgia has by far the better overall team, and they're going to be able to go on the road and get a big-time win at Death Valley, which, as we all know, is not a super easy place to play, but I think they'll be able to get the job done. Then a bye week coming in to the Florida matchup in Jacksonville, as it always is. And this is a Florida team that no one needs to sleep on either. A couple people actually have them picked second in the SEC East. This is a team that returns 19 starters and brings in a great offensive mind in Dan Mullen from Mississippi State. They bring in 10 starters on offense, 9 on defense. I believe Felipe Franks is going to have a solid year. I know people are quoting that they're going to have a quarterback battle, but I think should be the number one quarterback there and return practically everybody on offense except for maybe one wide receiver. So the Georgia defense is going to have a little bit of trouble, I think, against what should be an explosive Florida offense. But in the end, I think this game could be very close, closer than many expect. Nothing like the game was last year. But Georgia's going to get a win down in Jacksonville against their rival Florida, and that's going to be a very, very big win, very big confidence booster for them. And they're going to be on a 6-game win streak going into Kentucky to start November, the most crucial month in college football. They took easy care of Kentucky at home last year. I don't expect any problems on the road this year. Once again, for Kentucky, their strength is going to be their defense. Yes, they have a very solid running back in Benny Snell, but I don't expect any trouble to come from the Wildcats against the Bulldogs here. I think Jake Fromm, assuming he is still a starter, is going to be really getting into a groove at this point in the season. They're going to be feeding the ball enough to DeAndre Swift, who I actually like. I'm actually very impressed with. I think he's going to have a pretty solid year now that he's going to be the workhorse and not necessarily splitting as much time like Nick Chubb and Sony Michel did last year. So Georgia's going to get a win on the road against Kentucky. And then 3 straight home games to finish out the year. That's huge for the Bulldogs, a team that's trying to get back not only to the SEC Championship, but to the college football playoff. And this is going to be one of their toughest games right here against Auburn. A very, very big game against Auburn. Jarrett Stidham versus Jake Fromm. And this is a team, last year, a lot of history between these two. You remember Auburn came in to Jordan-Hare Stadium last year and just annihilated Georgia. They're a number 1 team in the country, just annihilated them. Georgia gets their revenge a few weeks later in the SEC Championship to send the Bulldogs to the college football playoff and ruin the Tigers' college football playoff hopes. So there's going to be a lot of revenge on each other's minds there. Georgia got their revenge last year in the SEC Championship. Will Auburn get the revenge in Athens against the Bulldogs? And I just don't see it happening. This is going to be a very great environment for this game. I really do have a lot of faith in Georgia's offense. I know a lot of people were concerned about it last year, especially when Jacob Eason went down with an injury in the season opener, but they, I think, surprised a lot of people. Jake Fromm, I think, is one of the more accurate passers in the SEC. I think he's going to have a good day here against an Auburn defense that's going to be very strong. But I'm going to give the edge to the Georgia offense to be able to score enough points here. And obviously the defense is going to continue to get stronger every week, into shutting down Jarrett Stidham and what could be a weaker Auburn offense. So another win for Georgia. Another win for Georgia here against UMass. Shouldn't be a problem there. A little bit of a tune-up before Georgia Tech. Last year with it being on the road, Georgia went in there and just took easy care of business against the Yellow Jackets. And I expect that to be the same here again. Georgia Tech just missing out on a bowl game last year. I expect them to get back to a bowl game this year, but shouldn't be a problem. They run that different style of offense that some people consider a high school offense. They say it doesn't work, and I think Georgia shuts that down, especially at home in the season finale, and gets a good win here against the Yellow Jackets, which is going to give them an 11-1 record, which is a very, very, very solid record. And like I said, they will lose one game this year. Maybe it might not be against South Carolina. Maybe it'll be on the road to LSU. Maybe it'll be at Auburn at home. Maybe it'll be against Florida in Jacksonville. But they will lose one game this year. I'm picking it to be South Carolina. Some people are saying that if Georgia finishes 11-1, that they might not make the college football playoff because of their weaker schedule. And I don't really buy that. Their schedule is not super weak. About a third of their games are fairly tough in my opinion. A road game at South Carolina, at LSU. Death Valley always tough to play in. Florida, a team that's going to be much improved from a weak team last year, and then Auburn at home. And if you look at that, only one of those is a true home game, which is Auburn. Florida's at a neutral site in Jacksonville, and 2 of those are road games. So some people are saying it's a weak schedule. I'm not really buying that. I think 4 of their 12 games are against fairly tough opponents. So this 11-1 record is certainly going to be good enough to get Georgia back to the SEC championship with a date potentially against Alabama, a rematch of last year's national championship. I do not see any team really getting super close to Georgia in terms of the SEC East standings. They are the clear favorite in the SEC East. I expect them to win that and make the SEC championship, and could potentially be 1 win away in that game from making the college football playoff for the 2nd year in a row. So a very, very solid year for the Georgia Bulldogs for the 2018 campaign. If you haven't already, please go to Twitter and follow us there at Gridiron Expert. Just at Gridiron Expert. Also on Instagram at The Gridiron Expert. And always here on YouTube. Please continue to like, comment, and subscribe. And we will see you next time on The Gridiron Expert.